Host, you, the voters. And when the candidates sit across from us, nothing's off the table. What's your plan to make New York City feel like a safer city?
S.E. Cup, that's your perception. Of course, there's a lot of crime.
So what's happening right now? Let's dive in. Welcome to Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. It is Tuesday, October 7th, and that means we are just 28 days away from this all-important New York City election. That's less than a month. Later in today's show, we're going to talk more in depth about the national implications of this must-watch race for mayor. But first, let's get to some news and analysis. Joining me now is David Freedlander, a features writer covering New York and national politics for New York Magazine. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. I just read your piece. It's really good. That's where I want to start. Your piece is called The Mamdani Effect, and you say Democrats seem to be acting differently since June. Is that a coincidence? Explain what you mean.
Well, I mean, I think you're seeing this focus on on affordability for one thing, from Democrats all across the country, and more Democrats are just sort of like sounding like Zoran Mamdani, and here in New York, many are just like backing his agenda, including folks who previously were skeptical of him, hadn't endorsed him in the primary, and are going to be controlling that agenda, like the governor of the state, the heads of the legislative chambers up in Albany. And then, also it's just really worth noting, I mean, when this race began back in the beginning of the year, he had his sort of views on the war in Gaza, and they were really considered sort of out of the realm of like Democratic mainstream party politics. And now they're kind of endorsed by, candidates up and down the ballot around the country.
And supported by a lot of voters in pockets you might not expect. The embrace of affordability by Mamdani and now other Democrats seems like such an obvious, uncontroversial thing to do, but the fog of war that was the 2024 election, I think, clouded Democrats' thinking for months as they sort of sifted through issues of Biden's age and race and sexism, whether they were going on the right podcasts. Do you think they're finally coming around to the obvious thing, which is the top issue that matters most to all Americans, the economy?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard even to believe at a time when why any Democratic politician wouldn't focus on it, right? But the issue is that I think Trump just provides so much like churn and so much stuff to talk about that like how do you focus on the price of eggs, when they're rounding up immigrants or whatever, right? And and like Mamdani kind of doesn't take the bait on it. He just always kind of brings back to this this sort of three pillars of his campaign about free childcare, free buses, and rent freeze, and like people will kind of ask him about like, what about this tweet about the police you said, or something else? And he just keeps bringing it back to that conversation. But yeah, it does seem like obvious.
He is laser focused on affordability. That's really good. But to your point about Trump and just, the never ending churn of Trump, I think that's part of it. But to me, I covered the 2024 election, of course, and to me, it felt worse than ignoring the economy. They told voters that they were wrong about how they felt, right? About the economy, crime, and immigration. And that's politics 101. Don't do that. But I'm wondering if you think Mamdani can go there because he doesn't have the responsibility issue that Democrats do. If they admit the economy isn't great, then they have to take responsibility for some of that. Mamdani, as an inexperienced, unattached Democratic socialist, he doesn't have to be responsible for any of the problems he's identifying. It feels like maybe that's liberating and maybe makes him something of a unique kind of candidate.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a lot easier for a non-incumbent always to grab that message, right? And he has the advantage of being like able to run against the Democratic Party, which is a huge advantage because the Democratic Party is like super unpopular. So, the extent to which you're able to do that, and he's able to do that, I agree, is a huge advantage to him. But Democrats aren't like they're not in power now. They could be running on affordability now.
Yeah.
And I mean, is that the message we're hearing from Democrats in power? We are in pockets, which is what I talked about there, but like I don't think you're hearing it from sort of congressional leadership.
I think you're right. I think nationally you're not hearing it as a coalesced message. I think locally you are though. And I've been watching a number of these races across the country that kind of look to mirror Mamdani's. We've had some of those kinds of candidates on. And I've really been taken lately by Graham Plattner. He's a harbor master, oyster farmer from my neck of the woods up in New England. He's a progressive guy. He's running against Susan Collins for Senate. He feels a little Fetterman, a little Bernie, and in fact, he's joined Bernie on his Fight the Oligarchy tour. Is the socialism that's the thing that's thriving here and connecting all of these candidates that are popping up, or is it their just outsideriness?
Yeah, I don't think it's a socialism. I mean, I don't. I haven't covered that race in Maine a lot, but I don't think Plattner would call himself a
Mhm.
socialist. I think that's a probably like unique to New York kind of phenomenon, and maybe other blue cities like in Portland. So no, I think it's like an out. I think it is the outsideriness. I mean, I think the sort of like democratic socialism that Mamdani preaches. I mean, in a way, it's just like a way of like signaling that he's like outside of the Democratic
Outside of the
Party
outside
and
of the
outside of like the
outside. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, like outside of Democratic like party power structure in the way that like if you were an oyster farmer, Mamdani like was an elected official, so he's not
Mhm.
able to like get there quite the same way that like a first time candidate who was an oyster farmer can.
Yeah.
But I think that's what he's doing, and of course like the socialism like it really does provide him with this like base of support that has helped him out in the race a lot.
Okay, David, stay right there because I've got more questions for you coming up after the break. Battleground NYC. We'll be right back. And we're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And let's get back to more news and analysis from this race. Back with me is David Freedlander, a features writer covering New York and national politics for New York Magazine. David, Republicans have done well on the affordability platform. Trump zeroed in on it a lot during his campaign, not always in ways that were like truthful or politic, but certainly in ways that made voters feel seen and heard. Should Republicans start to worry now that Democrats seem to have maybe rediscovered this as an important issue?
Worry, I don't know. I mean, Republicans like seem to have some advantages coming into this sort of current political environment, in part by just like seeming to have a lot of ability to get their message out through their media
Yeah.
channels. But like one of the sort of like truisms of politics, I think, is that most people like want to have more money in their
Yeah.
pocket, and so to the right, they just want more money, and if you can promise them more money, deliver them more money, even they're going to be happy with you.
Yeah, and that's what Trump is up against too. This cuts both ways. You can identify the problem, which is what Trump was rewarded for in 2024, but then you have to deliver on it. Do you think that Democrats will be able to let go of Trump and Epstein and democracy, the things that they really wanted to focus on in 2024, that are important but not as important to voters as affordability in time for midterms?
I mean, I'm not sure there's much evidence that they can. Whether they're able to sort of right the ship, I think remains to be seen. I mean, I think if you're a Democrat, like it is a hopeful sign that, as you pointed out, like a lot of these campaigns are
Yeah.
focusing on the question of affordability, and that a lot of Trump policies, including tariffs and including the immigration
Hmm.
crackdowns. Like nearly every economist say will create more
Right.
inflation. Should it do that? Then there's really something to hold on to. I mean, I think, it's like the inflation is not as bad as it was a few years
Hmm.
ago, but it's still pretty
Hmm.
bad. And I think voters are probably pretty still unhappy about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. There's a lot of wait and see in terms of how these issues will shake out for the midterms. But back to this election in New York, can Andrew Cuomo win this race, David?
I think he has a shot. I'd probably give him like a better shot than most people you've had on the
Okay, tell me.
show, but I don't give him what's
Tell
that?
me.
I don't give him a great shot.
Okay.
Like, I think it's probably like a 30% chance. I think it was helpful to get Eric Adams out of the race.
Mhm.
Like, I think it's maybe like the question is not can Andrew Cuomo win, but can Andrew Cuomo make it close? And like, it's not close right now.
Yeah.
It's just not. He's down by 20 points or something like
Yeah.
that. But you can sort of see as voters' minds clarify as we get down to it. It sort of does become like a two-person race. Is there like a that's a real question for me is like in 2 weeks from now,
Mhm.
is this race close? And then the question of whether or not Cuomo can sort of get over the edge, get over the hump.
Yeah, and I see, the 2 markers as the two debates, right? That'll be a
Yeah.
big opportunity, hopefully for moderators to ask some really tough questions of the candidates, including Mamdani, um, but also for a lot more people to see the candidates because we know that in the primary, about a 16th of the New York eligible voting population turned out for that primary, a 16th. So there's a lot more voters, including Democratic voters, to turn out for both candidates.
Yeah, and that's why Cuomo's like keeps doing it because he said that there's like a wider pool of voters. I think the hard part, like Cuomo needs to have the race sort of focus on Mamdani and not focus on
Yeah.
himself. And I think that is like it's just kind of like a struggle for every
Uh-huh.
politician. I don't know if you saw his ad, the AI
Oh, yeah.
ad where he was like
Yeah,
pretending to be a stockbroker in a
and
subway,
a window
and like
washer.
the window washer. The thing that struck me was it's like the issue is not whether or not you can kind of like humanize Andrew Cuomo. I don't think you can humanize Andrew Cuomo. Like he is too well known.
Yep.
But you can maybe, if you're him, you can like raise questions about some of Mondani's proposals, his experience, his background, his ideology, and like that's sort of the
I
opening.
think that's a really smart point. Finally, what about Curtis Lewa? I think he could definitely be a spoiler, but could he win? Wasn't that long ago that New Yorkers, including this former New Yorker, elected Republicans mayor and governor.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a no on
Okay.
that one. He can't win. He like if there was a four-way race, and everybody was kind of polling around 25%, then maybe his like 25 to 30% could win.
With like 28%. Yeah.
Yeah, like, but that didn't happen. That's not going to
Yeah.
happen. He's just not I mean, he's a Republican, but he's also like a little bit of a mascot who's been on, morning TV
Yep.
shows and morning radio.
Yep.
So
We've
sorry,
known him a
I
long
don't think we're gonna see
time. If
that.
you've covered New York at all, you've
Yeah.
known Curtis Lee a long time. Okay, David Friedlander, thanks so much for being here and sharing your reporting with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Okay, don't go anywhere. We'll come back after the break with some of the bigger picture in this race. Battleground NYC. We'll be right back. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. And joining me now for the bigger picture is Jennifer Steinhauer, the senior director of the University of Chicago's Institute for Politics and a former City Hall bureau chief for the New York Times. Jennifer, thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and great to see you. I want to get to a new op-ed you have out, but first, just as a former City Hall bureau chief, I want to get your assessment of this race. How does it stack up to previous races that you covered?
Well, having covered City Hall years ago, having covered politics across the country, different mayors' races, governors' races, I think this is just really the quintessential modern campaign, right? I mean, it's not making the typical stops, not making the typical, check the box speeches to this particular stakeholder group and that stakeholder group. It's just getting onto all these corners of the city, the use of social media, all the ways of communicating that just have been obviously part of the campaign season now for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
This just feels like the zenith of it all, where half of this campaign seems to be taking place on social media, where people who don't even live in New York see it, and become aware.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, we say this every day. This is like a national race in a way because it's gotten so much national attention. How different a candidate is Mamdani for New York?
Obviously, most candidates, especially if you look at the history of New York City and the machines that produced candidates, even in the post-machine world, there were just certain boxes you had to check. Now, Mike Bloomberg sort of shook that up, right? And would Mike Bloomberg have ever been mayor if 9/11 never happened? The conventional wisdom is no. I'm not sure that's actually true. I think it was more complicated than that. But Mark Green at the time, who was the Democrat in that race, thought he had it in the bag even post 9/11 because he checked the boxes. He'd done all the things. And Mike Bloomberg had done none of the things. And in a sense, partly, I think that's what people were looking toward in a time when the city needed to be rebuilt. And the city needs a different kind of rebuilding right now, right? The city is almost the opposite of what that problem was, and that it kind of feels like an enclave in some degrees for this, not even the 1%, the 1/4%, right? And everybody else. And so that is, no one has really, that's always been talking about two New Yorks and things like that. That has always kind of tracked some mayoral campaigns, but no one's ever sort of really been an avatar for that part of New York. And that's what I think is different about him.
That's a good point. The excitement I hear from voters is what stands out to me. I haven't heard this kind of excitement in Democratic corners since Obama, frankly. Just the excitement to rally behind someone, the excitement at the promise of real change, not the fake change every political candidate promises, but real change. I've not heard that in a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, I would associate myself with what your prior guest said earlier. David said about sort of running against his own party. I think that is very true. There's nothing terribly exciting about the current Democratic Party. I think also, even to the extent that there are candidates or leaders people are happy with, obviously there are some governors in that party that are strong and attracting national attention. But generally speaking, the other piece of this is, in a lot of ways, you remember the Republicans in, say, 2010 when they were kind of at war with themselves. That's what's happening in the party, right? There's these kind of two basic postures that they're taking, and they're fighting with each other. They're fighting with each other, and they're seeking this identity. And so he's not in any of that identity. He's not sort of associated with any of the camps that you see. He's something fresh and different. And the part that I will not necessarily agree with David is he talks about how perhaps Cuomo could make this race about Mamdani and his lack of experience. I'm not sure that's the negative that we see in traditional campaigns. That is where you go at someone. I think in this case, a lack of experience and a lack of participation in traditional Democratic politics is actually probably working in his favor, and that is what's sparking a lot of the excitement that you're obviously seeing.
Yeah, I think you're right. You understand New York, as I've been saying, it's liberal, but it's not Portland. There are big forces moving against Mamdani in the city, like Wall Street, like developers in real estate, like police unions, not because they're evil, but because they're big, important institutions and interests in New York City, and they're influential. If Mamdani wins, though, what will it tell you about those influences?
Well, one thing that's interesting, I think I never hear when people talk about where Mamdani gets his influences, no one talks about Donald Trump. But look at how similar these strategies are. Who are you going after? Working class voters, low propensity voters, people who don't necessarily get excited about any race, multiracial coalition, which That's
Yeah.
what Donald Trump had, right? In his
Yeah.
last race. So I think you're looking at people that are kind of written off or not thought about in campaigns, whose numbers could really swell against some of the Wall Street and the big business you're talking about. Also, let's talk
Yeah.
about the demographics, which was the center of my piece. Younger voters who we know came out a lot more in the primary, even for that poor turnout that you mentioned. And
Yeah.
what, 30 to 35% of voters are 18 to 40 in the city. And if they're aligning themselves with Mamdani, it just shows again that demographics are a certain force that can overcome those types of influences.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about your op-ed right after the break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this with more Battleground NYC. And we're back with Battleground NYC one more time with the bigger picture is Jennifer Steinhauer, the senior director of the University of Chicago's Institute for Politics and a former City Hall bureau chief for the New York Times. And Jen, your op-ed in the New York Times is titled "Stopping Zohran Mamdani Won't Save the Political Old Guard." What's your message to Democrats?
I think that it's that you can complain about the younger up and comers, and we certainly saw that with AOC when she beat an incumbent who was on his way to the speaker's gavel.
Yeah. Joe
Obviously,
Crowley, right.
Joe Crowley completely, she came in, alienated many of his peers, didn't even want to deal with her. She was pretty chin out when she first got there. I think she learned to be more of an institutionalist, as people do. It's always, will they change Washington and will Washington change them? We see a little of both in her case. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, she was not welcome, right, by her own party, seen as kind of a young upstart who what are you doing here? Well, again, what do we know about millennials? There's a lot of them. And a lot of
Mhm.
them are running for office in both parties. And you can be angry about their politics. You can be angry about their techniques. You can be angry about their prescriptive policies. But there's a lot of them, and they're here. And they're going to start beating older folks all the time.
Yep.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, and you write younger politicians aren't being stopped by wait your turn messaging. And we're seeing that all over the country, Jen. I we've had a lot of these young candidates on, but I still see a resistance among Democrats, whether it's, 88-year-old Eleanor Holmes Norton saying out loud, "I am not stepping aside," or Maxine Waters, she's 87, saying she's going to run again in 2026. Put it this way, there are 50 members of Congress age 75 and older who are up for re-election next year. Of those, nearly 70% say they are running again, and of those, 70% are Democrats.
Mhm.
The party is still largely missing this, I think. What's your take?
I think that's right. Listen, what is of all the many things that all of us hate to give up, power is top of the list. And it's
Yeah.
actually sort of amazing how addictive elected office power is. I'm always surprised by how people will not let go of the free parking
Me
spot.
too.
It just really means a lot to them. And I understand that. And that's true in the private sector too. It's true in academia. It's not just elected office, but it's especially true there. And they're surrounded by people who uphold that message for them. And that's what they hear. But they will start to get the message as more of them win, I think. And that's true in both parties. You see a lot of fresh faces, but you're absolutely right. There's been more of an intransigence against in the Democrats. And look, let's give a nod to Nancy Pelosi, right? People wanted her to go way before, and she ended up being the strongest arm against Trump. And it was kind of, I told you so thing. But Nancy Pelosi is I would say, a sui generis character in American politics. And most people just don't have that kind of energy and prowess or new ideas to sustain that.
People are going to lump a lot of these candidates together. Mamdani, I mentioned Graham Plattner in Maine. I put Omar Feta, Minneapolis in that category because they're running on socialism or socialism light. But there are lots of other Democratic candidates running to the right of their Democratic incumbents or predecessors, running as moderates. Do you think they can have as much success as a true outsider like Mamdani?
I think what Democrats and Republicans have both learned over the years is that you've got to have the right candidate for the right place, right? You've got to fit you've got to fit to your voters, not make your voters fit to the candidate. Mamdani, that guy might be, I'm not going to state this unequivocally, but that guy might just be one of those generational talents, right? Who's just really, he's got all the things, and he doesn't stand for other people, and other people don't stand for him. He's just this generational talent that people gravitate to. But yes, of course, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the fight within the Democratic Party. I saw a quote the other day. It said, "Do Democrats think that it's better to have a Democrat from West Virginia who doesn't support trans women in sports, or is it better to have a Republican from West Virginia who probably doesn't support trans people in American life?" Right. So these are kind of the decisions that Democrats have to grapple with. Will they accept moderates if that gives you what you actually need are votes? And I think it's like they're kind of not there yet, right, on the national stage. But yes, there are lots of moderates who fit the district and who will prevail. Look at the other races that are going to be in the special election. It's not just him, right? New Jersey, Virginia. They're not running a Mamdani campaign, right?
Yes, that's a really good point. Okay, for 2028, I know we got to get to midterms first, but it's always fun to talk about. If you could issue one piece of advice to Democrats, just based on where you sit, you're talking to a lot of young people at the Institute there.
Yeah.
What would your advice be to Democrats for the presidential in 2028?
Well, I'm probably not in the best position to be giving advice to either party, but I will say that what you were talking about before in terms of that affordability message, and I know that can just sound like a tape we're going over and over again, but that is all young people talk about, is their ability to, I have one kid who graduated from college, and 80% of that class was jobless when they graduated. They can't get jobs. They certainly can't afford rent. I know he said, we talked about inflation going down. Actually, inflation's going up in a lot of areas that are affected by tariffs. So it's all about the economy's stupid. That still resonates. And for kids who've never heard that phrase before.
Another great point, Jennifer Steinhauer. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And we'll see you back here tomorrow and every Monday through Friday for more in-depth conversation, context, and reporting right here on Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote.
Thanks for watching Battleground. We're now joining Live Now's nonstop stream of live and breaking news.
The EPA's Offices of Land and Emergency Management and the International and Tribal Affairs. The Trump EPA is powering the Great American Comeback. That's according to Lee Zeldin, who is the EPA administrator, and John and Usha are the right leaders to help take this mission to the next level. In the meantime, another of President Trump's appointees, Attorney General Pam Bondi, was in the hot seat today as she faced